Well, let's get to it because NATO just officially a short time ago admitted, and it finally came out and admitted that the Nord Stream pipelines were sabotaged. Hello. Like, we didn't know this, but we now have NATO officially declaring that they were, in fact, sabotaged by a state actor. This is not some random guy on a moped or a little, like a jet ski out there or a dolphin. No, this is state sabotage, a government responsible for this. Germany says it's on the edge of an energy abyss, so get ready for blackouts across Europe. More on that in a minute. We'll cover more of that story in a minute because we have a lot of news to get to first on the major part of the Ukraine war and an update this afternoon on that. So first on the referenda, tomorrow everything changes in Ukraine. Tomorrow at 3 p.m. Moscow time, the Kremlin will host the signing ceremony, officially welcoming the 4 Donbass regions into the Russian Federation. They will officially become Russian. They will officially become part of Mother Russia. This is a major turning point in world history and an expansion, of course, of the Russian Federation. The New York Times, by the way, didn't waste any time missing a beat on this and continues to parrot the Biden administration's labeling of these referendums as shams. Take a look at your screen. Breaking news. Vladimir Putin will sign agreements on Friday to take over 4 Ukrainian regions, the Kremlin said, after votes widely denounced as a sham. A sham by who, by the way? The Western media? Like, who's saying these are shams?
I don't know. And I really don't like that word. It's not very strong. It's
well, they're parroting exactly what Antony Blinken said, the Secretary of State, right?
Yes.
Which is that these were sham referenda. And then immediately the Western media started parroting this word sham. It's appeared in all manner of Western media publications.
Yes.
Based on what? Based on what? You had no reporters there, New York Times. You had no journalists there covering this. The journalists who were there, like the Patrick Lancasters of the world, Eva Bartlett, Vanessa Beeley, Wyatt Reed, the list goes on, who were actually there watching this. No one had a gun put to their head to vote. In fact, the Russian Foreign Ministry says these elections were not shams. Not one person was forced to vote, and they voted to protect their families from 8 years of attacks by Ukraine. This was just a short time ago. Watch this.
Высокая явка проголосовавших и результаты волеизъявления их жителей говорят сами за себя. Люди не хотят возвращаться к прежней жизни. Они достаточно настрадались. Они выстрадали свое будущее. Они доказали, что они имеют право на мирную жизнь.
And the Russian people, according to polling, have wanted, actually, Vladimir Putin, surprisingly, most people don't know that he's a lawyer. Most people don't know that he's actually one of the more moderate people in his own government. And most people don't know, actually, that the Russian people have been pushing him to actually go further and harder and faster into Donbass.
right. His parliament voted for military action long before he took it. He really took a long time to get around to it.
Right. And so now here we go. A major shift. And so, of course, what this means is 3 p.m. tomorrow, Moscow time, means that the military operation now shifts from a special military operation to an anti-terrorist operation, which is what we've been hearing, right? The full weight and power of the Russian army going up against anyone who attacks these regions.
Now, I just feel the need to remind everyone that it didn't have to be like this, because when these regions were occupied by Russia early in the conflict, they were happy to say these regions are independent. We'll support them, but Ukraine now leave them alone, right? And that was part of the peace deal that the West continues to ignore.
Right.
So this could have been over a long time ago if the West was willing to be humble in any shape or form.
No, of course they weren't. And right. And this is, again, why NATO doesn't want this war to end at all. They want to fight till the last Ukrainian. They don't give a rat's ass. In fact, new reports and secret information came out about NATO's involvement. One former NATO advisor said that, no, NATO doesn't care at all about the Ukrainian people. They're using it as a staging ground, a proxy war, and they will fight to the last Ukrainian because they don't care about the Ukrainian people at all. That's why yesterday NATO held a secret meeting that was exposed by the New York Times. According to the New York Times, 40 NATO members met in secret to ramp up their war in Ukraine, not de-escalate the war. Their goal, of course, is to turn this into a forever war, which is what they want. Here's what the New York Times says. In a sign that the United States and its allies believe that the fighting in Ukraine will last years, military officials from more than 40 countries gathered in NATO's headquarters in Brussels on Wednesday to discuss how their governments can ramp up production of arms and ammunition. Because they don't clearly have enough arms and ammunition going into Ukraine. Can you believe this? I mean, they've been telling us this is what's going to happen for a long time.
Right. So then, yes, I said no, I can't believe it, but yes, I can.
Yes, you can.
It's unbelievable, but believable, like the world we live in today.
Let us know in their chat if you can believe this. NATO is actually going to start sending more weapons to Ukraine. Can you believe this? Is it shocking? NATO is
I personally am shocked.
Philip's
Are you shocked?
I'm personally shocked.
You cannot believe
shocked.
Scandalized.
This sounds fake. This is fake.
More weapons? Do we have more weapons?
There is always room for what was the commercial? There's always room for Jello. There's always room for weapons.
There's always room for weapons. Last night, someone in our chat or in the comments after our live show said, and by the way, after tonight's live show, I will be in the comments section of the live show afterwards. So for about an hour. So after the show is off the air, join us in the comments section and we'll go back and forth and have a discussion. So feel free to do that. But
Clayton never comes to bed.
Right.
He just lives, sleeps, geopolitics.
So last night, someone just wrote the words fake news in our comments. And I said, could you please be specific? And then another person chimed in and said, how refreshing. A channel is actually like when someone like engaging with someone who internet trolls who just post things like this. I said, yeah, if I'm being wrong, if anything that I'm saying here is inaccurate, what we're doing is we're reporting based on facts and evidence. So if there's anything that was actually faked and you have some evidence of that, please let me know. That person never responded, of course, because it's just easy to type those words and then walk away from your computer. But you should know that NATO is a weapon of U.S. hegemony. It's very easy to uncover that. It's not fake news at all. You can do your own research if you like. If you speak out against it, you will be locked up. You will be blacklisted. You will be pushed to the side, which is this unbelievable moment yesterday. I want you to watch this. When British Labour Party member Angelo Sanchez got up, because they're voting right now to send more money and weapons to Ukraine. And you're seeing this fracturing now in certain leaders in Europe saying, no, enough is enough. Our people are suffering. So he got up yesterday and told the truth about NATO aggression in Ukraine. He told the truth about Ukrainian censorship, about oppression of people, about it being one of the most corrupt countries in all of the world. Yesterday, he got up and said this. He told the truth about how corrupt Ukraine is. He was suspended from the Labour Party and kicked out of the conference when he said this. Watch.
What does supporting motion 13 on Ukraine mean? It means that the future Labour government will be sending money to a government, the Ukrainian government, that is repressing the left in their own country, a government that is criminalizing socialist parties and imprisoning Ukrainian activists. You will be supporting a government that has passed anti-workers laws which completely strips Ukrainian workers of collective rights. If you support this motion 13 on Ukraine, you are not supporting the Ukrainian people. You are supporting only the United States. You are supporting neoliberalism. You are supporting imperialism. The main aggressor...
Sorry, excuse me, delegate. This is a debate. You've got to listen.
Yeah, so they cut him off.
We don't want to hear that.
We don't want to hear
anymore.
that. Sorry, you can't say that. Isn't it amazing, though? He was calling out their BS. He was saying the Ukrainian government has been suppressing people, oppressing workers' rights, censoring speech. And they're like, yeah, this is a violation of workers' rights. Yeah, you're right. And he says, so if you support this motion to send more money to Ukraine, what you're doing is you're supporting the U.S. and NATO hegemony. And people are like, boo, wait a second.
I was on board until now.
Right at the end, she's like, hey, this is a debate, dude. You can't bring up points that you don't like. That's not how debate works.
Do not debate us with the alternate viewpoint.
So he's been suspended. I just wanted to bring that up. This is what we're seeing right now. And this is NATO hegemony at work. I mean, right inside the Labour Party, inside the United States government. So updates now on the pipeline situation. Swedish authorities noted a fourth explosion to the pipeline. And this is amazing. So we now know, and they have also confirmed these are not earthquakes. I know the Western media is trying to say these are probably earthquakes. No, Swedish and Danish authorities, as we reported last night, have both said that's impossible. Seismologists have said that is impossible. These were not earthquakes. This was deliberate explosions set by a state actor. That is what happened. Sky News actually confirmed what we reported last night. We beat Sky News on this story from our intelligence sources that this was likely carried out by an underwater drone strike. Here's Sky News. Nord Stream was likely hit by remote-controlled explosives. Mines could have been planted near the pipelines by a boat or underwater drone. And they're even saying months or even years ago, and then controlled remotely. Swedish authorities have found an underwater drone that was there. They found it back in 2015 with explosives around it. They had to remove it from the pipe. It didn't go off. And conveniently, that drone was never identified what country of origin it came from.
They didn't look. They didn't bother.
Isn't that interesting?
Like, isn't there a lost and found for drones?
If you find my American drone, please return to
Wanted.
1600 Pennsylvania Avenue in Washington, D.C. Russia this morning is demanding answers and an investigation by the UN against the attack by the United States on this pipeline. They released this statement. Here's the Russian embassy. We note that the attempts by some U.S. legislators to put blame on Russia for the incidents that occurred on Nord Stream 1 and Nord Stream 2 gas pipelines, perhaps they have a better view from the top of Capitol Hill. But if that's the case, they must also have seen the U.S. warships activities at the very site of the Russian infrastructure disruption just the day before, or noticed drones and helicopters flying over there, or observed U.S. Navy exercises with underwater explosives that had been conducted in the same area some time ago. Finally, they should have recalled the promises made by President Biden to bring an end to the Nord Stream 2 project. Yes. So all of that is true. In fact, the Navy confirmed as much. Moon of Alabama pointed me to a June NATO report, which I forgot about. But actually at the time in Europe, I remember reporting on and reading about all of the NATO exercises that were unfolding in the Baltic Sea. There was course, there was like 11 countries that were involved in these exercises, Portugal being one of them. We actually saw warships on their way to these exercises. So witnessed it with my own eyes, this happening. And it showed NATO has total control of this area in the Baltic Sea, according to this Navy report. This is from the Navy report itself, right from the Navy's website. This was the report. Baltops 22 was the Baltic maritime exercises that was unfolding there. And they used naval forces, Europe Naval Striking and Support Forces, NATO, and the NATO Strike Force carrying out these military exercises. And what's interesting, I'll pull this up on my screen here, which is some of the things that they did was scientists from at sea. The ships fine-tuned tactical maneuvering, anti-submarine warfare, live fire training, mine countermeasures operations, and replenishments at sea. They also did, the scientists from 5 nations brought the latest advancements in underwater vehicle mine hunting technology to the Baltic Sea to demonstrate the vehicle's effectiveness in operational scenarios. Like, this was all unfolding this summer in the exact spot. And I think the larger point about this Navy piece is that NATO has full control of that section of the ocean. Right. Full control. And submarines and all of the large warships that are in that area.
I mean, so you would think that there would be some kind of, I don't know, you watch the movies, right? And everyone can see something coming, the blip on the radar.
Right.
Like, something's going on here. And
Hunt
so
for Red October.
We live in this world where so much is recorded and monitored that it feels so unlikely that someone doesn't have something incriminating.
Well, and just a few days ago, so that was the summer. And then just 2 days ago, we had the U.S. 6th Fleet left the Baltic Sea, was right there only a few days ago. And on Wednesday morning, the amphibious assault ship, the USS Kearsarge, which we talked about last night on the show, escorted by the landing ships, the USS Arlington, the USS Gunston Hall, was en route towards the west. Previously, the ships were part of U.S. units that took part in NATO maneuvers and called at numerous ports in Germany, Scandinavia, and Baltic states. Off the coast of Denmark is where the pipelines were hit. Just days ago, the USS Kearsarge was at that area. Coincidence? in an area that's completely controlled by NATO, that's where these 4 explosions. But this, I mean, it's amazing to watch the Western media over the past 24 hours trying to pin the blame on Russia. Like CNN did a whole thing last night with, they had like John Brennan on, former CIA head, who was spinning. He's like, yeah, it's clearly Russia.
And also just utterly unconcerned about the ecological fallout. Like,
right.
Oh, that happened. That's too bad. We'll investigate.
Who cares?
It's not like when it happened near our country, so whatevs.
Whatever. It's just happened by near Germany. It happens off the coast of Europe, so who really cares? Glenn Greenwald points out that all of this Western media coverage of this is total BS on this topic because for years, as he points out, the U.S. has been trying to sabotage and end this pipeline. Watch.
How many things have been blamed on Russia over the past 5 or 6 years by the Western media, by the EU, by neoliberals and deep state operatives that turned out to be completely false? They even invented a conspiracy theory. You probably remember that Russia had some super secret hypersonic weapon that was causing brain damage in American diplomats that nobody had ever heard of before, and it turned out to be debunked even by the CIA. Why would Russia explode their own pipeline that gives them enormous amounts of leverage? They can turn off that pipeline at any time that they want, which gives them exactly the power that they most want. I don't know who did this, but what I do know is what you said, that a state could only do this. But also the U.S. has been obsessed for years, going back to the Bush administration, with trying to bully and coerce and persuade the Europeans not to buy natural gas from Moscow, but to instead buy it from the United States. Donald Trump, while he was being called a Putin asset or blackmailed by the Kremlin, was one of the leaders in badgering the Germans, saying, we pay you for your defense. You should be buying natural gas from us. And now suddenly the pipeline blows up in the middle of this war, and we're going to blame Russia for that? The country that has the least interest in doing it.
Yes.
Again, though, the media is capitalized on the fact that most people don't really study geopolitics. They only are swallowing the Putin bad, so everything undesirable is related to them.
Right.
That there's no nuance in this, just sort of accept the headlines like, oh yeah, that's too bad. He keeps doing bad stuff. Hope the U.S. wins.
I mean, it's unbelievable. Meanwhile, Germans are not falling for it. They're pointing the blame squarely at the United States and NATO. But you still have like NATO apologist media like CNN saying, well, the U.S. and Germany are allies. And then clearly the United States wouldn't do this to one of its allies, Germany.
But we'll bug your phones.
Yeah, we'll bug Angela Merkel's phones, and we'll also tell you to go screw yourself, as Victoria Nuland did to EU. Mark Stein, who's been one of the real clear-headed voices, brought up a great point on his show that I hadn't thought of, which is that the United States wouldn't tell them about any of this. They left Britain and Germany and all of its allies high and dry repeatedly without telling them anything. Listen.
Do you know, after Afghanistan, people say, oh, well, this couldn't be the Americans because Denmark and Germany are their NATO allies. Well, when they bugged out of Kabul, they didn't let the British or anybody else know that they were abandoning Bagram Air Base. Those guys just woke up in the morning and found that all the Yanks had left. So if they were doing something like this, it's entirely possible that they wouldn't let the Danes and the Germans in on it.
Yeah. Yes. Great point. Right. We didn't tell them anything. Oh, here you go. Where'd the Americans go? Where'd the Americans go? They left us holding the bag. What the hell? They're just gone. They're just gone. Unbelievable. And then they were like, and they were actually pissed about it. You know, Britain was like, well, what the hell? Like, we didn't even, you didn't tell us anything.
We were in this together.
I thought we were in this mess together for 20 years. So how will this affect us? I mean, that's the big question, right?
Well, Europeans are now being warned that there could be a disruption of even mobile networks this winter. My theory is that Germany was starting to cave to the pressure of protests and the demands of their citizens to open up this pipeline, and we're about to do it. And that's why whatever forces said, oh, no, you better not. Because I do think that Europe was budgeting some extra affordable energy this winter because they need it, right? And so now Europeans are being told that even cell phone networks could be disrupted.
Why? This is interesting. So why is this?
So the energy crisis in Europe could cause blackouts and disruption to mobile service because telecom companies are saying that the energy shortage will push their networks to the brink. That's because these networks, the cell towers, run on electricity, which necessitates some type of fuel. Well, in France now, they're going to do routine maintenance on their nuclear reactors. So those will go down for a while. France is saying, well, I know we don't have a lot of energy, but we're just going to go and polish these and not use them for a while. That's a bit inexplicable. And then again, the crisis of fuel to power the power plants that we run our lives on.
So let's talk about blackouts, actually, because this is a big piece of this, right? Which are far worse than we think. You think, oh, blackouts, like that's not a big deal. It's like just like a power outage, and it'll, flip the switch, it comes back on, everything's good to go. No, I mean, and I have to admit, I was fairly ignorant on this point until last night when I spent some time watching German television. So I speak German, and I translated this German television report with a blackout expert, Robert Jungisch. I'm not saying his last name correctly. He's a blackout expert. So my German is not top notch. I translated it the best that I could to be as authentic as I could. This was on German TV's independent network, Off One. Again, with a blackout expert, says this is a catastrophe in the making, and it is going to be absolutely devastating. It will be fatal to the German people when we have these blackouts, which are coming. Watch this.
In den Medien nicht so drastisch gewarnt wird, wie das nötig wäre. Man hat mir zum Beispiel letzte Woche bei einem Interview vorgeworfen, dass ich Panik machen würde und nur Profitgier hätte, weil ich gesagt habe, die Blackout-Wahrscheinlichkeit schätze ich auf 99,9%. Dabei ist es eigentlich Blödsinn, eine Prozentzahl zu sagen für ein Ereignis, was noch nie eingetreten ist, weil Wahrscheinlichkeiten kann ich nur berechnen, wenn ich auch eine gewisse Wiederholzahl habe. Aber ich wollte damit einfach zum Ausdruck bringen, dass es eben sehr, sehr wahrscheinlich ist und wir schon mit einem Bein über dem Abgrund stehen. Denn wenn man das nicht tut, wenn die Leute nicht endlich verstehen, dass wir vor dieser dramatischen, möglicherweise Situation des Blackouts stehen, bereiten sie sich nicht vor, was eben gerade passiert. Und dann wird es für diese Menschen, aber auch für die Unternehmen katastrophale Folgen.
I mean, it's startling. So he's saying it'd be a total system failure. And you cannot just like turn the power grid back on and off. I mean, 30% of electronic devices would be destroyed during a blackout. And it's going to be fatal for people.
Yes. Now in Europe, we're being told that some of these sort of selective blackouts will be in places that don't disrupt emergency services like hospitals and police. But in Africa, they're being told that they can expect power outages that hit ATMs even. That is a terrifying feeling, that you couldn't go and get your own money, right?
And gas
filling
stations,
that kind of thing. In fact, rolling blackouts have already begun. In South Africa, the power company says that it's keeping lights off to contain emergency generation services, meaning we're just trying to protect the grid. And so we're going to turn things off selectively. In Zimbabwe, they're calling this load curtailment, right? They're just trying to keep what the grid can sustain. And yet, as less power is available, people are paying a premium for what they can get. So you may not get power, but you still will get it up the butt with your energy bill, right?
You're going to get it up the butt. Yeah. And again, we talk about Africa, right? And we need to spend more time talking about Africa. We try to do it on this show, covering stories from Africa. And it's important because we've said all along that who gets affected the most in all of this? It's the poor countries in Africa that get affected the most. So they're already, when you look at Germany, like, that's fantasy. They're not going to have blackouts. It's already happening. It's already happening in countries with infrastructure that is not as strong. They don't, and they're the ones that get the brunt of the damage, right? They bear the brunt of this damage, of course, on food, on energy, on all of it. So when we talk about green energy and climate referendums and all this garbage, it's Africa that gets hit the hardest because their entire infrastructure relies on fossil fuels. When you take that away from them, hospitals close, they can't do ultrasounds on women, and they can't do C-sections. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. Just if you dive into the data, it's really, really terrifying.
Well, given that this show is run out of Europe and the newsletter as well, we continue to, in our heads, run down these emergency situations like Could we eat the eggs from the chicken? Could we grow from the garden? But this part of it, like you couldn't get your money out of an ATM, or I couldn't call my child who's at school, right? We have a middle schooler. And then how would I find him? Those are the things that give me the most anxiety. I was watching one of the channels I've mentioned a few times, Earl Grey, which is a British expat who lives in Russia. And he was saying, I don't feel like this conflict is going to escape anyone. He said, I moved to Russia because I thought the pandemic was a sort of, let's wait it out. This will end. We all will be okay at some point. And he calculated that Russia was the best place for him and his family. And he's like, I'm comfortable with that. But he's like, I don't think this calculation will be available for anyone anywhere on the planet based on this coming conflict. It feels like this is coming to all of our doorsteps. For some people, it will be a lot louder than others. And that really struck me, this idea that like, it's not a wait and see situation. It is something we all have to collectively just try and live through. We're going to talk about Serbia in a minute and the idea of peace talks that may not be an option, no matter how much we might want it. And we talk about this much on the show that we all do want peace talks.